Now, our first speaker is passionate about harnessing blockchain to transform the lives of people in emerging economies. She previously worked at the Doctors Without Borders in Congo and is now also blockchain expert at Singularity University. Anne Connelly. Anne, welcome at the Dutch Blockchain Week.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, I think you're calling from the US, New York or San Francisco?
From Canada, actually. I'm in Toronto.
In Toronto. Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really curious about how did you get involved in blockchain, in the blockchain ecosystem with blockchain technology?
So I used to work in the humanitarian aid industry, and part of my job was paying the medical staff that we worked with in, some of the world's most remote places. So when I was younger, I used to actually carry knapsacks full of money through war zones and jungles to be able to pay the nurses and doctors that were treating our patients. And so when I learned about Bitcoin in 2012, this was the first use case I thought about was I'm never going to have to carry a knapsack full of money ever again. But then, of course, you start to learn more and you think about these populations that you worked with and how many of them don't have access to financial services or to money that isn't, the victim of severe inflation. And then you start to look at how blockchain can actually enable us to redesign some of the structures that we've built society upon that have created some of the issues in many of these regions. And so that's what's made me so passionate about this technology is not that it's solving new problems, but it's finding new ways of solving some of the world's greatest challenges, and that's what gets me so excited about this whole industry and this whole way forward.
You're also saying this with a lot of passion. It's interesting what you mentioned because you remind me of this photo in the National Geographic magazine about all the trucks in Congo filled with cash that are like once a week, once a month, just driving towards a village and they're distributing the cash to all the government workers. So what kind of exciting projects are you working on right now when it comes to blockchain?
One of my most exciting areas that I'm looking at the moment is DAOs. These are decentralized autonomous organizations, but essentially what it is, it's a way for large groups of people who are all around the world to collaborate and coordinate around a shared passion or a shared vision. Now, these DAOs can be anything from, groups that come together to invest. So there's groups that are their purpose as a collective is to invest in NFTs. There's specifically one that invests only in high fashion NFTs. So they pool their money, they all vote on what they want to invest in, and then they all benefit from the outcome of those sales when they sell their NFTs. But where these start to get really exciting is that you can actually start to coordinate whole companies in this way, in ways that you haven't been able to in the past, where the collectives are essentially run and organized by the communities that drive these projects. And I think that's what's really exciting is, when you think about a traditional company, you say, listen to your customer, what do they want, what do they need? And the best way to actually listen to your customer is to give them an actual voice in the outcome of what's going on and enable them to propose improvements and to vote on those. And so I'm working with one organization right now, which is called Gitcoin, and they essentially look at how we can improve access to resources and funding for open source public good projects. And so it's really a mechanism that communities can come together and say, hey, we collectively really want this type of tool or this type of infrastructure, and we're going to work together to create it or to provide it with the resources to succeed.
Wow, that's really interesting. And is already one of these projects, is it live and functioning, or are you still developing it?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's hundreds of DAOs that are out there, and I think really if you're looking to get involved in something new and exciting in blockchain, this is really an area I would take a good look at. Many people around the world are now working for DAOs. There's no underlying company that's paying, your paycheck. It's coming through cryptocurrency. There's all types of different jobs with these DAOs, and it's very rewarding work. And Gitcoin was one of the first. The first DAO came out in, I think it was 15, but now they're really coming to be a major and the next big item in the blockchain space, I would say. Gitcoin I would take a look at because it's particularly interesting because they're also using mechanisms of quadratic funding to support the funding of these different public good initiatives, and that's just essentially a mechanism to take power away from people who have a lot of money and move it into the hands of communities so that the voice of perhaps people who don't have as much money to put towards something will actually have a stronger voice within a larger collective. And so I would definitely, worth checking out Gitcoin and what they're up to. It's very exciting.
Really exciting stuff. But when implementing this, I mean, your work, when I look at your work, it has been mostly focused on really the impactful work of blockchain in development countries, working with or for NGOs as well. What is the biggest hurdle when it comes to implementing the technology over there?
It's, I mean, really, particularly when working with nonprofits and NGOs and those types of groups, the biggest hurdle is mindset. And it's really, and this is not about the countries themselves. There's some incredible projects coming out of emerging economies. There's some really wonderful projects coming out of Kenya and South Africa. But when you're looking at sort of the old institutions that have done that work in the past, it can often be slow to adopt this technology in the future. So looking at, even organizations, I wrote a book on how charities can accept cryptocurrency donations. And a lot of them are still hesitant, even though it wasn't even last year, it was this year, in March of this year, Vitalik Buterin, who's the founder of the Ethereum blockchain, made a $1 billion donation towards COVID relief in India. That's huge, $1 billion. So every organization should be setting up a cryptocurrency donation program, but many are still hesitant. And so I think if we can really help that whole sector to get away from the stigma of Bitcoin and the stigma of cryptocurrency and really recognize the opportunity, then that's going to help them to take advantage of all the benefits that come from this new technology.
So more blockchain and not Bitcoin, as they usually say. So,
but Bitcoin, even Bitcoin, I think, and that's often a first step for a lot of these groups is, okay, well, we'll try accepting it and selling it, or, Bitcoin in a way is the gateway to everything else. And so I think sort of separating it by saying, well, we're okay with blockchain, but we're not okay with Bitcoin, still makes us uncomfortable, is not the way that we want to present it. I think we want to see everything as a potential opportunity to create change.
Interesting what you mentioned about the book that you actually wrote about crypto in charities. We had one of our speakers in the past days was a Dutch startup that is actually bringing the blockchain technology into charities. Still working on this. In the past session, we had a conversation with the United Nations, the UNICEF Cryptocurrency Fund. They're doing tons of amazing projects as well. In your book, what was like the key finding? What was like the biggest hurdle? What was the most interesting thing that you that you found out, and or what you can recommend to charities to actually work on?
I think, you're absolutely right. UNICEF's been doing amazing work for a long time in the space. World Food Program's been doing it. There's a number of major charities that are working on different programs. I think the biggest hurdle really is that a lot of leaders go to their boards or go to their CEOs and say, can we do this? They ask for permission. And really what you should be doing is asking for support. And you say, we're going to launch this program. Here are the benefits. This is an incredible opportunity for us to make lots of revenue, bring in all these new donors. But they go in asking for permission. And it's really, this shouldn't be a question of if, it should be a question of when. When are we going to set up a Bitcoin program? Because that's happening. This is the new world. And if it's not this year, then let's agree that it's next year and work towards that goal.
So speaking of next year, what is the most exciting development that you're looking forward to in the next year?
Oh my goodness. There's so much interesting stuff that's happening in this space. It's hard to say. I'm really curious to see how, the NFT space is obviously very interesting. I think it's pretty close to the peak of the hype at the moment. Okay. But what I'm really interested to see is how that starts to merge in with the metaverse and how brands are going to start to say, okay, we're going to drop whole clothing lines that you can take from metaverse to metaverse to metaverse. what that means for the real estate market, where people that had traditionally invested in physical real estate assets are now investing in these digital plots of land, and what they're going to be able to do with that, and all these sort of financial products that will come from that have never existed before. And so I think it's really about making that transition from how does cryptocurrency and blockchain integrate with today's physical world, and moving into how does this create opportunities in the new virtual world that we've never been able to do before.
Now, when it comes to your work with NGOs and in development countries, do you see also some interesting trends when it comes to metaverse, NFTs in these kind of countries, or is it purely right now more the Western world who is really focused on this hype, creating NFTs, all the big brands that are stepping in, or do you also see some exciting things coming up in the development world?
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, adoption is exploding. We've got huge user bases in Nigeria, in Southeast Asia, in Latin America. And what's really exciting is, they're building products for their communities, which is great. We're moving away from this model of people in Western Europe and North America are building for them. They're saying that's not what we need. This is what we need. And so we've seen some really incredible projects coming out of those locations. There's some great African artists that are pushing out NFTs. I'm actually working on a project with an artist out of Kenya that's a graphic novel that teaches teens about blockchain, but through a very traditional hero story. So it's fun and interesting first, and education sort of woven through. And I think what we're seeing is some really neat stuff. There was a movie, like a traditional film that came out that dropped NFTs as a part of their launch a couple days ago. And they launched it on, a Nigerian-based NFT platform. And so there's lots of potential for investment in some of these companies, and also for just, great products that are a good fit for the communities that are actually building them.
Wow. And I'm also wondering, what is next for you? I mean, you're involved in so many incredible projects. Are you busy with writing a new book, or going back to Congo to do some development work there? Or what is next for you?
That's a good question. I'm teaching a new class at Boston University called Blockchain-Based Business Models for Social Impact. I'm very passionate about education, and I think that's really the first step to getting more adoption and getting more people on board, is helping them to understand, how is this technology transformative for the planet? I think, folks, certainly in Canada, when I talk to them about Bitcoin, will say, well, I'm never going to use Bitcoin to buy milk and bread. Like, why would I ever abandon the Canadian dollar? And I say, yeah, but when you think about the 1.4 billion people around the world that live in economies with, double, triple, or quadruple inflation, we need to create a parallel system that gives them choice, that gives them the opportunity to choose whether they want to use their national currency or some other cryptocurrency, so that they can, have options in their financial lives. And so I think for myself moving forward, very passionate about governance, decentralized governance, where that's going, but also, really helping others join us on this journey, because the more people we have, particularly more diverse people we have building different blockchain applications, will just be better for the entire ecosystem.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. We already had several conversations about having more females in the blockchain ecosystem, but also how can we work towards more education of the ecosystem. So it's already interesting to see so many incredible initiatives evolving here in the Netherlands, but also on the global atmosphere. Like from your side, we're looking now forward in the upcoming year. We see a lot of exciting developments, NFTs, metaverse. We will have a conversation after you about regulation. What is another aspect that you think really like the industry should work on to take this next quantum leap in e-technology?
Oh my goodness, that's a good question. I'd really like to see governments get on board with driving it forward. We've seen a lot of hesitation, and governments are, of course, not typically known as being super innovative and super fast, with the possible exception of maybe Estonia, which is just incredible. But what I'd really like to see is them to really embrace blockchain and say, we can still provide really high quality services for our citizens. Here's a way we can do it better. Here's how we can be more efficient. Here's how we can be more transparent. And I think what that will do is increase people's trust in government, really let them know that hey, we're interested in transparency. We want to know that you're doing a good job, and here's the technology that's going to help us do that. And as opposed to trying to put up barriers for people in the industry that are trying to build out great products. And if that means that tax systems need to change, or the way the government operates needs to change to adapt to this whole new world, then I think that's what needs to happen. They need to adapt. But I'd really like to see a lot more of this technology implemented in the way we govern ourselves and in the way we support citizens.
Wow. Beautiful ending of this great conversation. Anne Connelly, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Canada. Really appreciate it that you took the time to actually share all your insights with us. So thank you so much. I'm looking forward to your new book or anything else that is coming out of your pockets. But thank you so much for joining us, and wishing you all the best.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Cheers.